Welcome to the Ask Faleskini, the debate series. I'm proud to have in my guests again, Stephan Wagner. And I hope that we start today's debate with an insight in the German auto industry. I wrote a post on LinkedIn about what killed the German auto industry. And I sincerely hope that this post will be just a warning and not obituary notice. So, Stephan, you read my post. I would like to challenge you first with the ecology as one of the three really important factors that killed the German industry. I would like to have your take on it.
Well, it's not such an easy question, and I hope I don't overstep my rhetoric boundaries in here, because feelings are sometimes quite intense when it comes to that topic. The point is, we as Germans were able to do something really unbelievable. We were really able to kill that by ourselves. We needed no one else. So it was not China, it was not the US, it was not the world market, it was all on ourselves. So with that, I don't want to use the word delusional, but with the way going into electric cars, with our political ideology we follow right now, it's a difficult situation just following up that was basically introduced more than 10 or 15 years ago. It all started really with a moment where the big brands started to try to cover everything quite without success. Mm-hmm. If you look back at the fiasco we had with the Mercedes A-Class that wasn't even able to pass a single, we call it ELK test.
Yes.
That was crazy, especially for Mercedes-Benz. That harmed the brand massively. And why did they go there? Because they somehow thought they need to build smaller cars for everyone instead of staying in the segment they were super successful all over decades. This super success allowed them to bring a quality that they were known for worldwide. When I was in my teenage years, if you needed a car that was reliable, always, you buy Mercedes. Mm-hmm. That reputation is gone. And the A-Class was a massive impact on that.
Yeah, can I just jump in? I'm a huge fan of Mercedes. I don't know if the listeners know that, but I still own three Mercedeses that I consider classics. That is the S-Class 126 that was produced from 79 till 91. Then after this came the VW 140 that was produced from 91 to 97. And after that came W220 that was produced after the 97. The plastics in W126 are spotless, perfect, not even bleached. Plastics in 140, even if it's legendary and it was in all movies, are completely in disarray. Almost half of the plastic I already had to change. And these are cars that are not daily driven anymore. So they are kept in the heated garage, and the moist and everything is almost perfect for them. So the plastics, due to the recycling and let's say believe that everything needs to be recycled and the recycled plastic is better than new plastic, they destroyed the car. So after 25 years of let's say decay, the plastic is gone. Basically, car has started to self-compose. This might not be the best ad for my cars, because my whole collection is for sale right now, but it's important. It's more important that we have open debate about the economy. I would also like to have your take on that. In the 80s, the German families that were really industrious, the owners of the companies, were not so much into politics as they are today. you mentioned that the politics did a lot of wrong decisions in the last 15 years. Would you say that politics messes much more with industry that it used to like 20 or 40 years ago?
That's not only a difficult, but even a dangerous topic nowadays. The point is that we have certain streamlines worldwide when it comes to ecology and also to politics, which basically we could follow this path to a point where we really would get a shadow ban on all platforms. So, let's stay a little bit on the
let's stay mainstream and be contrarian as far as we're allowed to be.
That's probably a good way to put that. If you look at the situation from a little bit more remote point of view, there were certain mainstreams. One of the mainstreams was extremely high quality, which was Mercedes following for many decades. Extremely high quality allows you to have a product, to use a product for decades.
Mm-hmm.
To use this argument for a higher rate of recycling did not only lead to a better recycling quote, it also led to the situation you described, the car itself decomposing,
Mm-hmm.
but it also led to a situation that the life cycle of these products became much shorter.
Mm-hmm.
So in the past, it was not very difficult to find your own S-Class after 30 years in a holiday that you made somewhere in Mumbai, in Africa, in South America, wherever, and it was still running. It was still running.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays, you won't find that anymore. The mainstream with the climate change topic, and I won't go deeper in that because that's another thing that is quite difficult, led to a situation that many people started to create a frame where we had to go more and more to a higher rate of recycling and at the same time into electric mobility, which was not really perfectly thought through from A to Z. It was always taken out as a segment. And if you take these things only as a segment, if you only look at the part of the whole story, you can only always find ways to present that in a positive way. So mainstream people would follow it, would even believe it. And there is not really a harm in it, because to dig really deep in these topics uses a lot of effort and a lot of time. So it's not a negative thing that many people started to believe these things, which led us to a situation that electric mobility became a main agenda in Germany. And the connection between industry and politics also became much closer over the last 15, 20 years. That's my direct feeling I have. So the agreement to step out of we call it burner vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
and to massively focus to electric vehicles had and still has an unbelievable impact to the whole industry. The governmental change we had 2 years ago did not really made anything better in that. So today's situation when it comes to car manufacturers is that they try to create a frame where they can make a profit. At the same time, they want and they have kind of to obey to the regulations that are thrown to us. It's a difficult moment.
Or I have an opinion on that. Would you agree that in the 90s, somehow the financial guys took over the cars? And from there on, the car was only the product. There was no more passion, and it was only something that adds value and something that adds numbers to the bottom line. It was not an object of passion anymore.
Oh, I agree 100%.
And that led to just not getting greed to, but not taking care of the huge advantages that German cars had in the late 80s or mid 90s. Because if my opinion, so if you were driving a German car, for example, Mercedes S-Class, because I have that for a long time, and the the sheer comfort was second to none, especially with the W220 class, where you have air suspension. And I have on a 97, I have rated guided cruise control and similar. That was something special at that time. But all of this was just given away. And now basically there is 800 Chinese manufacturers of cars. And you're competing on levels that with pricing and similar, because in let's say my time when I was young, it was normal that Mercedes is a bit more expensive, but it will last you a lifetime. So it was just a matter of repairing the rust, and you can have the same car till you die, probably, if you don't want to change the model. And right now, you're competing with all these new manufacturers that have no tradition. They might have similar equipment in the factory, but there is not industrious tradition. Because I know that in Germany, whole families were employed by same car manufacturer for like 2-3 generations, and that means that you have this tradition, and you have this sense of belonging and all this stuff that is now gone. And there was this passion in every product. There was a passion for reliability, passion for serviceability. That is also something that I noticed that has dropped considerably, because servicing the car in the end of 80s or servicing the car today is something completely different. Now nobody thinks about the guy in the service garage that will have to change the oil filter or something. In the 90s, that was important. For example, in Mercedes, the oil filter was really close to the front. So when you opened the place where the engine is, you could immediately reach for the oil filter, and everything was there. So it was done in a way that even if you wanted to service a car at home, you could do it. There was no limitation, and nobody would say, no, you have to go to the official service and all this stuff. Right now, it's almost sacrilegious if you do your own servicing.
If it's possible at all.
Yeah, if it's possible at all, but just thought of that is, no, something wrong with you. That is no more the thing. That is the thing of the past.
I think you're right with your assumption that these things have changed, but it's not only the last 10 or 15 years. When I started my career already like 30 years ago, I realized one of the first things I realized in the car business was the so-called TQM from Ford. Ford at that time had massive quality problems. Yeah. And one of the points to try to solve that was to find, let's say, a more Western way of the Asian Kaizen. And how they did that was they introduced a total quality management system. And although that increased quality, it was also the doom for many other things. Why? That total quality management system helped Ford to increase the quality. That's positive. And we felt that in Germany too, because here in Cologne, there is one of the largest manufacturing sites for Ford. Sadly, that system was also used not as TQM, but they called it differently by all the other car manufacturers in Germany too. That had one probably wanted side effect. One of the side effects of a total quality management was a complete knowledge of all the single processes in the single used and manufactured parts down to each single small supplier. That also meant that the car manufacturer at the end was in a situation where he was able to dictate prices because he knew basically everything, even from his suppliers. That led to a situation that profits were more and more shifted to the main manufacturers because they dictated prices. They also introduced the A to C system when it comes to suppliers. So if you were not the most favorite supplier, you were only able to get a much lower price as a C-level supplier for the exactly same quality, and the manufacturers played suppliers with that. As the next point, manufacturers were able to create a much higher margin. And that higher margin was needed by you mentioned, by the financial guys, because growth is the holy grail in financial.
Mm-hmm.
And you can only grow if you either increase prices continuously or if you decrease purchase cost and manufacturing cost. And they were able to do basically both. But doing both forced them to create a system that wasn't be able to be serviced by yourself. Because if something is being serviced by yourself, it needs to be taken into account while you construct it, while you engineer it. But that wasn't the goal anymore. The goal was a continuous growth in revenue and also a decrease of purchasing prices. That meant when at the later stage, after 85, you engineered a car, you didn't engineer it by the pure needs of your customer. You engineered it by the needs of the given system of continuous growth. That also meant if you engineer the area for the engine, you engineer it in a way that, first of all, your parts do not have an unlimited lifespan anymore, point number one. And secondly, you engineer it in a way that only specially trained engineers were able to do any kind of service, or you had to use some very specialized tools, which you were probably not able to buy on the free market.
Okay, I would like to challenge you with something that you started. Would you agree then that the cars did not serve the end users, but started serving the financial market? So basically,
Absolutely.
the focus switched from the consumer market to the financial market, and somewhere in the 80s, the cars, so the car industry as a whole, some sooner, some later, become the hostage of a financial market, because the only god that they serve was financial guys.
You called it exactly by the right name. You mentioned something like passion before, passion for the product, passion for what you can do with the product. If we look back in history a little bit, for example, to a Ford Shelby, that was a pure passion product. There was nothing like growth or financial. That was only passion. That was power. That was, same goes basically for the old Mercedeses and some other cars. But this passion was really completely replaced by financial interests. And at the same time, I don't want to use the word quality, but the abilities in marketing, storytelling, and framing increased exponentially too. So the frame that was created was basically the thing is being created for financial reasons, and the frame that was created by marketing was that it was only being done because to serve customers' needs better. But these were not customers' needs. It was basically a very clever storytelling to cover the real need for financial growth. So I'm absolutely with you with all you said.
Would you agree that total quality management killed creativity, because everything needs to be prescribed, do exactly as a process? But we know that creativity sometimes just jump a couple of phases, and then you take care of the product later on and improve it.
Well, the answer is quite easy. At the end of the day, humans create, right? How do we learn? Do we learn by doing everything right, or do we learn by making mistakes?
Yeah, so basically eliminating mistakes also eliminates creativity.
Absolutely, that's exactly the point. And if you look at the product, which now is cars we're talking about, there are so many different brands of cars, but the cars look exactly the same, or nearly exactly the same.
And when you talked about the total quality management and how producers try to squeeze the manufacturers, there also something came that was not usual before in the 80s, is that there was a lot of components shares. So more and more cars start sharing the components. Right now, to the extent that you can find Renault parts in Mercedes, and similar things that would seem sacrilegious in the 80s, but are normal today. And there are also model shares where you have these small Mercedes vans are also made in same factory as Renault's, and all these platform shares and everything came about just because of the financial interest, and not because engineers would think that that is the best design.
I'm absolutely with you there. You know, this model sharing thing is not a new thing. If you look at the G-Wagon from Mercedes, you won't find them in Austria, because in Austria, they are sold by Steyr.
Yeah,
Steyr was the
I know that.
initial engineer who created the G-Wagon. So that's a kind of model sharing that I totally support, because if you are in a country, a smaller country, especially like Austria, and you engineer such a car and you get the license to use that model for your own country, that's great. But you are not talking about that one. You are talking about agreements, for example, between Citroën and VW to use the same engine in different cars. You are talking about agreements between General Motors and others, or between Volvo and BMW to use the same engines. And that's basically not creativity. That's minimizing losses. That's erasing mistakes by not developing something new. That's an intentional closing your eyes in front of the needs of your target customers. It's basically fulfilling a need with the lowest amount of effort.
Yeah, that is also something that is extremely clear and visible. And I would believe that all these strategic mistakes that started in the 80s, probably some of them even earlier, have now in the 40 years materialized in these huge challenges for a German car industry. I would also say that there was a huge problem with German car manufacturer buying cars abroad, especially brands that are, let's say, really strong. For example, Lamborghini in Italy, or Bentley and Rolls-Royce in UK. And the culture is completely different at that factories. And all they did is just they swap some parts again. So the cars might seem to be more reliable, but the uniqueness is gone for sure.
Absolutely. If you mentioned a very great brand, Lamborghini. You know, when Lamborghini presented its first sports car on a trade fair together with Ferrari, and his first car, or not first, one of his new cars, basically Ferrari had the slogan, if you want to be someone, you drive Ferrari. Lamborghini told the people, if you are someone, you go for Lamborghini. Today, these differences are not there anymore. And here, the same thing. Finance basically dictated that behavior.
And another thing that I noticed as a huge car aficionado is that now only top model are sharp. It's same with, for example, Porsche 911. That is an icon and one of my favorite cars. But if you bought a 993, the base model was really sharp. So you had to have some skill to drive it and all this stuff. Now, if you want a sharp car, you need to go for GT3 or similar. And
or to a much smaller sports car manufacturer, which then has a side effect: you have no luxury at all.
yes, and that was that they had this let's say special status about it, and then they destroyed all the lines with the Cayenne, Panamera, and all these other cars that are great cars as per se, but the line
but they are
extension
mainstream
Porsche
cars.
brand
They are made to create to get to a much larger audience. And you know, if you buy a R-Wagon from Mercedes or a Panamera from Porsche, there's not a big difference anymore when it comes to pricing and to options. So they try to eat away each other's market share, which just leads to a complete unification of the product.
And there is always a huge problem, because this cannibalization between German brands is a huge problem, because there are other brands from US and UK and other manufacturers that that could be the target where to get the market share, but they basically totally cannibalize the market. And I remember in the late 80s when Audi 200 came out on V8. That was something special because Audi was known for that time model 100, and that was a competitor to the 5 Series, and then they made 200 to compete with the S-Class and with the 7 Series and all this stuff. So, and in the 80s or mid 80s, like E32 7 Series was much more sporty than W140 S-Class. And if you wanted a sports Mercedes, you went to AMG, that at that time was not a trim level, but was an independent tuner. So it was, you knew if you want a 4-wheel drive, you would opt for Audi A8. If you would want a sporty car, you would go for a 7 Series BMW. If you want a comfortable car, you would go for an S-Class. And
these differences are not really there anymore. And
yeah, now it's just a trim level.
The background of what you just said is also a kind of that we call brand loyalty. Mm-hmm. So this brand loyalty was rooted in what you just said. So younger guys in my past, they never go for Mercedes. They went for BMW. Liberal guys, more modern guys, they went for Audi. And more conservative person, they went for Mercedes. That's not working anymore. It's completely washed and unified. The difference today between an Audi A8 and an S-Class and a 7 Series BMW is basically the logo. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's negligible. It's all brakes are made in Brembo. All wheels are made there. All seats are made in Recaro. Everything is just. There used to be a huge differentiation in the 90s. So even in a design, you could see it from a mile away. What is what, and when you heard the car, you could tell which one it is. Today, that is almost impossible.
That's true.
So, what do you think would be the best for a German car industry? Going back to the roots or starting completely anew? Would you agree with my thesis that the oil industry was super strong until the mid 90s or early 2000s, and as a balancing act against the oil industry, this green energy and electricity guys started posing or forming new policies. And right now, the oil guys have no power whatsoever. They are almost going to be extinct if they don't fight back. And then there's this green energy, then that is ready to kill everyone if that does not comply. For my economy part of the occasion, I believe one of the most effective engine was a diesel engine that was really, I believe, developed in Germany. 2-liter diesel engines even from the 80s and before that. And then 3-liter engines that are right now pushing 400 and more horsepower and consuming with normal driving like 6-7 liters. I think that's just amazing. And
well, I can absolutely agree. The last longer trip I made with my car, and I have what do you call it? A 3-liter V6 engine in my, well, it's an Audi. I went quite exactly 1,050 kilometers with one tank filling. And my tank is 72 liters.
Yeah.
And after that 1,050 kilometer trip, I did not refill completely. My board computer told me I was using 5.9 liters on 100 kilometers, and I'm not the slowest driver. So these engines are great.
Let me just explain to the US audience. Not the slowest driver it means in German that you're driving about 120 miles
Exactly.
on average.
Exactly. And 5.9 liters, 100 kilometers is basically, let me check that in gallon, because the US is also.
I think we're pushing 40 miles per gallon, something like that. It's just amazing.
It's more, it's even more. It's about 55 miles per gallon.
Yeah, so that's amazing with the 120 miles per hour average speed. So basically, he talked about 1,000 kilometers. That's roughly 600 miles, and probably he did that in five-ish hours. So
it was a bit more. It wasn't completely free on the highway, but it was not that long of a time. I think I needed something like 7 hours, and that's okay. That's quite a good rate.
No, that's excellent. That's something that in US it's impossible to imagine. Or these are the average speed of the record runs through America.
And first of all, that is never possible with an electric car. There is no electric car on the market that can do that from range and speed. Also, it was summertime, so an electric car would have used a lot of energy for the AC control, and that was already included in the calculation. But the point is much more your basic question about the old guys and the electricity guys. You know, I learned in my life to look up facts. Facts are basically proven things that are reproducible. A calculation model is not a fact.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
it's a
point
theory.
number one.
It's a theory, not a fact.
It's a theory. That's point number one. Point number two, the whole climate discussion is based on a theoretical calculation model, not on facts.
Yes.
If you look to the facts, you realize, yes, climate change is true. It's real, but it's not man-made. It was always there.
Yeah, climate change was always there. That's for sure. What I think we can all agree is that we could do a lot on stopping the pollution, because pollution is a problem. That is, I think we can all agree that pollution and disposing stuff in the nature is not something that is beneficial. And I think this should be common ground, because all this debate, if it's man-induced or not man-induced, they are fruitless. So they bear no reason, because the key is pollution, and we need to stop a pollution in every so we need to stop the pollution. However, not for any price, because
first of all, not for every price, and second
sustainable
of all,
pollution.
Deeper scientific understanding in what is pollution. We had a time where the fluorocarbonized, the FCKW, were killing the ozone layer about 50, 60 years ago. That was a real man-made pollution. But to assume or even discuss that carbon dioxide is a pollution is just not having any real scientific baseline, because our carbon system we have is too weak. We basically need more of that. But people discussing these things and going into the topic that CO2 is a pollution is just a result of not being informed and believing calculated models. As a small example, we grow a lot of crops in the Netherlands, for example. And they grew crops, and not only crops, tomatoes, stuff, vegetables, everything. They grow that based on scientific knowledge. What they do is they are flooding the greenhouses with CO2, because CO2 is the main food for plants. If you look at the real history of the data, you realize that we could easily thrive with a double amount of CO2 with one main side effect. Nature would be more healthy, because we basically have not enough CO2 in the atmosphere. But that's a complete different topic. When it comes to the ideology of electric, that created a setup of systems, especially in Europe, like the ban of burning engines. So the combustion engine is being banned in all over Europe. That also led to a situation that even that even the the uh, the development of new fuels like hyper efficient e-fuels is not being wanted anymore. It's not being supported at all.
Yeah,
The
I would like to
development
have
of
your take on my compromise that I would push for if I would be the legislator. I
okay,
would I would push for hybrid vehicles where you would have an electric engine and a small battery, so that the last 2 or 3 miles that you do in the city would be electric, so that you would not have direct exhaust gas with the heavily or within heavily polluted cities. However, on the highway, you could use diesel or gasoline powered car. That would be my compromise on solution, and I would do that. I'm also not a big fan of AdBlue for diesel engines.
I'm with you there. The only difference or the only thing I would differentiate here is the kind of pollutant. The main problem in cities is not the CO2, it's the fine dust. It's the
Yeah,
super.
I would agree with that. I would agree, but we could also take care of that, or a lot of that could be minimized if the last 2 or 3 miles in the you would drive on the electric engine.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are two ways, additional ways that are not being followed by right now. First of these ways is a super efficient new e-fuel. There are e-fuels that are not giving out any fine dust at all anymore, but they're not supported. And the second thing is to reduce or minimize the need of batteries, because batteries is what makes electric vehicles being one of the biggest pollutants there is at all. If you, for example, compare a Tesla S model, one of the nicer ones, with a comparable combustion car, and you look at the complete information from the start of manufacturing to the end of life cycle, you'll realize quite quickly, if you look at the facts, not any model, if you look at the pure facts, that the Tesla has, even if you look at the CO2 result, a result that is about 35% higher than a comparable combustion car.
Mhm.
But that result, that reason lies mainly in the batteries. Now, if you could exchange the battery problem by a different way of carrying the energy, like hydrogen, you could get to a wonderful result there. Because if you take hydrogen as a main energy carrier instead of batteries, you could really create either a mixed vehicle that is using probably the last 10, 20 miles in front or in the city using the electric power generated by hydrogen and using any kind of different fuels on a highway, or you do the step completely and you really go to hydrogen or clean e-fuel powered vehicles. With e-fuel,
What
you
was
have a
with
classic
what was
combustion.
with the Porsche's project for e-fuel? They were really loud about it, and they just stopped their PR activities on it. I know that they
Not,
made a fabric in some production facility in South America somewhere, and now there's no more press coverage on that.
yeah. And not only Porsche, there were several products, several inventors also creating e-fuels that were fantastic from the
Mhm.
results, but they were just not supported anymore. So hydrogen is a great source of energy, and I don't know if your listeners know that already in the 90s, we in Germany we had a BMW doing a lot of field tests with hydrogen powered vehicles.
Yeah, 7 Series.
They even created the first hydrogen gas station
Mhm.
somewhere in southern Germany. Back at that time, there were massive problems when it comes to being leak tight while refilling the car and all of these things. Also, to refill hydrogen needs a lot of pressure. And to create this pressure also needs a lot of energy. That were the problems back then.
And there was the biggest problem was they were using almost almost the same engine, and the engine using petrol power engine, or when it was using gasoline, it had 286 horsepower, and when it was using hydrogen, it had just over 150. I
It
believe
was
that.
annoying. It was annoying to use.
But that is for Germany, because on a highway you can feel that in.
Oh yes, oh yes. In the States, probably it wouldn't be a difference at all.
Yeah, it would be.
Technology has evolved, so there is also a newer generation of fuel cell for hydrogen.
Mhm.
That means you can create much easier electric power out of the fuel cell that is powered by hydrogen. So you could really combine a hydrogen fuel cell for the last few kilometers and one of the more modern hydrogen optimized combustion engine for the long-term drive, or you just generate a much higher efficiency in the fuel cell that can create the electricity while you use it. So you don't need too much of storing space. You don't need too many batteries for that,
Mhm.
because batteries are the main problem.
Okay, I have another question. Um, in 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 the 90s, the S class weighted just over a ton and a half, so just over 3,000 pounds for the US only. And now it weighs more than 2 tons, so over 4,000 pounds. That is good for some tax deductions in US, because if the car is heavy, you can use it as an asset, and you get tax cut for that. However, how come that with all the carbon fibers, all the titanium, all these technologies, they did not succeed in making cars lighter?
Well, the first thing is here, it's a nice information that you get tax cuts in the States, because exactly the opposite happens in the Netherlands. You're
Mhm.
being taxed by the weight of the car. So that new S classes are barely sold in the Netherlands at all, because it's so heavy that the taxation of the car is going through the roof.
Mhm.
But the real point is, most of the manufacturers um, grew the weight of their cars, not only because they were, or not because they were not willed to reduce it, but there were so much need of additional products in the car. If you, for example, look at an actual Audi A8 or A6, alone the sound system has a weight of 60 to 80 kilograms.
Yes,
Yeah, it's like that.
and,
If
and
you
and
look
all
at
the
the
deafening
amount of,
foam and.
if you look at the bus system, in the past, like 25 years ago, the BW had a CAN bus system, which was a quite easy system with a four-wire connection between the single points. It was RS 487, 478, a quite nice bus system. But nowadays, alone the bus system that goes to each single electric microcomputer you have in the car is a weight of 50 to 60 kilograms. So alone the cabling in the modern car, the complete cabling, is above 100 kilograms, from my knowledge. So all these extra functions, if you look at the airbags, including the system to control them, in the 90s, you probably had two airbags in front. And then Volvo came with its six bags. So we had suddenly six airbags. If I look at my Audi, I have 12 airbags, and it's not the maximum. If you look at a completely new car, you might have 18 to 20 airbags.
Mhm.
Each airbag needs not only the bag itself, each airbag also needs a, a small pressure container. It needs a valve system and all of these stuff. So each airbag that you adds 150 to 250 grams. Add 10 airbags, you have 2 or 5 or 6 kilogram additionally in the car. If you
Mhm.
look at seats, in the time you refer to in the 90s, there were not too many cars with electric seats with a lot of functions like memory.
Mhm.
If you look at the S-Class you were describing with more than 10 tons, that seat is able to do miracles. So you program it to your body size and your seating position. And when you step into the car, the seat adjusts itself with, I don't know, 8, 10, 12 engines. These engines do not only need power, they also add weight.
Yeah, that's true. Do you think that there would be a market for an old school like Mercedes or BMW? For example, the Beetle was produced until 2000s uh, in I believe Argentina and Mexico. Do you think there would be a market 80s Mercedes, for example, W124 class.
It would be for sure a nice gimmick, but I doubt that that kind of Mercedes would pass the modern regulations.
Yeah, I thought of that. If we would produce less than 10,000 of them a year, we could skip a lot of regulations that are in place for big producers.
That's probably a nice idea for a startup. Retro
Yeah.
cars or steampunk Mercedes.
Yeah, I think that would be, and we could produce it. So there are a lot of manufacturers like Magna that would produce it for us if we could get a license from Mercedes to do that.
I'm even quite sure that that Mercedes would grant such a license. And if you look at Magna is the producer of the G-Wagon,
Yes.
Magna Steyr, yeah. So they have a long history of producing vehicles in a smaller.
And I don't know if you remember, the W124 was produced in Graz in Magna's factory,
Yeah.
the one with a four-wheel drive.
Yeah. And they are cool guys in Steyr. They are really cool guys. But looking at a car that does not have all these weight-adding features is not something completely new. A few years ago, there was a new commercial in Germany. If you don't need a status symbol, the Dacia Duster is the car that presents exactly like that. So the Dacia Duster was a car and probably still is a car with not really a lot of extras. So you have basically four wheels and your steering wheel and some kind of an engine, and it brings you from A to B. But that allowed the manufacturer to bring this car for a value of below 10,000 euros in Germany. And it was for a very long time one of the cheapest car to purchase, but of course with not a lot of extras. But that's exactly a car also with a very low weight. Still, the
that
market
is
share
something
was not too big.
that is something we could look into it. And I believe that if we could do a retro car like old Mercedes W124 or something like that,
It would be definitely a nice thing.
Yeah, that is something we should look in. Okay, let's go back to economics. So Germany and the whole Europe is just bracing for the impact of the future recession. Some are praying for macroeconomic miracle in a form of cheap money. Governments do not think about cutting spendings. They think about more program and increased spending and new investments. What's your take on austerity? Would the government need to practice more austerity, or they should just spend themselves to demise?
That was not by health, that was by public health. Well, I'm limiting my saying now to only the German area.
Okay.
The amount of money we spend in the moment would be enough to lift our economy back to a way where it can grow, where we can probably retake a position in the world market where we were like 15, 20 years ago. The problem is that we are not spending it for these kind of stuff. The problem is that we are spending it for completely idiotic things and topics. Let me give you a very small example. We've spent millions and millions to basically give back an archaeological artifact to one African state that was never asking for it. And we added a few millions to build a museum that they've never built. And at the end of the day, we thanked them for taking it. And that's just one of hundreds of examples how we waste money in the moment. There is, from my knowledge, as of today, within the last years, not one single investment that has been done by the German government that helped in any way for a positive growth.
Okay, I will go back to the German industry. Do you believe that they are relying on German funding and EU funding for development? How do you see this all? Because in 80s there were a couple of strong German families that would, or at least I saw them as a someone that really took care of the industry. They did not have any tendencies to go offshore and tax optimization, all this. They are proud to be Germans and they were investing in their environment. They were taking upon themselves really different projects. And then somehow everything went to the stock exchange, and then there was this money. Let's pay this out, no costs. Everything is financially, I say, sane. Nothing should be done for the environment. How do you feel about it?
You're right when you say that there were some families doing that, and still there are very, very few. One example is Mr. Grupp. Mr. Grupp is the owner of Trigema. Trigema is a company manufacturing sports clothing. Mr. Grupp was and still is known that he's trying to grow stuff in Germany, invest in Germany, manufactures everything in Germany, although textiles are being much cheaper manufactured somewhere in Turkey. But he still does everything in Germany. He even went so far that he cut distribution deals with the big chains and started to build own retail stores. Really a guy who breathes and lives for the German economy. And still a guy who employs generations in his factories. Still a guy who basically gives a promise to each family in his factory: if your child is old enough, it will have a job here. One of the few who is left. But even this person, the way he's speaking with the last 2 years has changed dramatically. The decisions that were being made here in Germany changed the way how you could create something in Germany so dramatically that it's different to really grasp if you are not in our system. Energy prices have increased in a way that it's not worth anymore to start anything here when you need energy. It's just the truth. If you look at funding and European funding, there is always to understand where is that funding coming from. Knowing that Germany was the biggest party paying into the European pots is basically a clear reference that we were basically funding ourselves when we took up European fundings. So these families who supported Germany and German growth years back, they sooner or later understood that you can try to to support German growth, but if there are too many areas where that growth is being drained, why should you waste your resources that are probably built up through generations? So it's kind of understandable why even those families started to look globally. And if you look at the latest changes in legislation here, until 2 years ago, if you were a wealthy German or if you inherited something and you realized in Germany it's getting difficult to at least to even maintain your wealth, you basically just changed the location of your living. So you basically went to Switzerland or to Luxembourg or to Netherlands, or you went to the US. Even that is now not easy anymore. Not easy to a point that people who counsel how to do that have to fear a visit from the authorities.
Yeah, it's called Aggressive Tax Optimization Act in European Union, and it's probably was proposed by Germans. And now things are getting complicated. If you want to be the citizen of the world, you can be, but you will pay taxes in all locations, not just one.
So, and I'm not against taxes. Personally, I think taxes are important. It's part of our society and how we've built it up. But it should also be in a way that the money is used in a positive way, not just wasted for nothing.
Mhm. So, what is the sentiment of German people, or especially talking about business people? So, your community. What is the sentiment? What will happen? Will there be a recession? And what will be after this recession? Will there be demise? What will happen? Or will there be a new tomorrow and things will be built on new grounds, on healthy and economical terms that will be beneficial? What is the general sentiment?
Well, we are already in a recession. And you can feel it. Even although many of us haven't yet realized that, because our contracts, if you're a standard employee, you're usually protected a lot by the contracts. But at the same time, so much money is being lost by the way our politics is done right now, that the recession has come already like a year ago. And all they are doing right now is to try to put out fires by wasting even more money. But the recession is real. It's the reason why we had a negative growth this year. And we are the only European economy who will have a loss this year. It's the first time in Germany.
I'm not so sure, because I do believe that other economies are bleeding very fast.
They are bleeding too. That's true. But the latest statistics from like 3 or 4 days ago basically show the smallest growth rates are somewhere around 0.7%. Apart in Germany, it's a minus.
Yeah, we'll see how, because these are all forecasts.
Oh, of course, absolutely. So I do
we'll see
hope
what
that
happens when everyone puts their numbers together, and when the optimism settles in a bit, because I would say that like 3 to 4 months ago, everyone was optimistic that there is going to be no recession, and that somehow with the monetary policy everything will be fine, and government spending can continue endlessly, and and everything will just come back to normal. We just need another investment program or something like that. And but
not in Germany. So the feeling we had here was not like that. Not months ago, not half a year ago.
I had an interview, you can check on my channel, with someone that represents the 400 wealthiest families in Germany, and he was certain that it's going to be a smooth sailing. And right now, I think everyone is getting worried how things will develop. What I can see, because I'm following the German car market, is that the prices of used vehicles are going down. They do not sell as much or as many of them as they did before. So the same ads are there and the prices are dropping. We'll see how this progresses, and more exotic vehicles that used to have fixed price are dropping prices fast. So the car market is in extremely difficult situation right now. I would say as much as pricing, also as much as quantity. So how much vehicles is being sold.
That's absolutely true. And if I ask myself why, the answer is quite easy. People don't have the money anymore. Energy prices have multiplied. It's not just a few percent. Food prices went through the roof, really through the roof. So if I do a weekly shopping, just standard groceries, today I pay between 40 and 70% more than 2 years ago. That's the reality. It's not the real inflation rate, because in a real inflation rate, you have very, very often products like TVs or these kind of stuff, the luxury goods.
Yeah,
they don't get much more expensive because nobody's buying them right now. But the real living cost went really through the roof. The abilities that you have with finding a small job or something like that, finding a second or third job or something like that, these possibilities went down like hell, because there is just not too much to do anymore. The job market is also in a real big trouble. On one hand, people are telling that we are missing out specialists, like specially trained people. But even with specially trained people, it's sometimes very difficult for them to get a job. The salary levels are not being lifted the way people were used before. And we have an incredible amount of new people here who are not fulfilling the minimum requirement of the working market. And we pay for all of them. So it's a quite easy calculation. We have about 15% of the population that is carrying 100% of the cost.
So one person, sorry, let me just do that. One person is taking care of 7 people. So one person that is employed is taking care of 7 people that are either on government, working for government, or without job, or retired, or in school. Is that correct?
I would need to check the correct statistics before I say yes or no, but I don't have access to that in a second. I believe it was about 15%, but it could be 23. Maybe I'm missing out, but it's a massively low amount of people. Mm-hmm. And it's misleading to just throw in this number, because in this number, of course, there are not included people being paid by the state. But people being paid by the state are not adding anything to economics.
Yeah, they're just recycling.
Yeah, it's a financial recycling, true. But the relation is very, very unhealthy. Mm-hmm. And that is something in the basic economics that is not being highlighted every day.
Okay. What is the solution to this problem? What would you say that needs to happen? That can artificial intelligence solve this problem, and this 15% of people become so much more productive with the use of artificial intelligence that they will have no problem taking care for the rest of for the 7 people?
You know, the situation here is quite easy, and it's really so easy that people are very often overseeing that, not seeing it at all. Mm-hmm. If you don't create, you don't add value. Mm-hmm. If you don't add value, you have to live off the value you have. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you use, manual labor workforce or artificial intelligence. If there is no added value, you cannot create anything. So basically, an area like Germany, with a limited amount of minerals, with a limited amount of oil and gas, with a limited amount of many things, created that value by manufacturing and exporting. To manufacture and export, we needed one basic resource, cheap and in unlimited amounts, and that was energy. Mm-hmm. We don't have that anymore because we have been too stupid to do the right things. So the energy we have right now is multiple times more expensive. Additional to that, our government is not telling the real truth. They are still, although facts are on the table, they are still telling us we don't have a problem with electricity. Fact is, we are under manufacturing electricity since months. We are importing electricity since months because we are not even able to fulfill our own electric needs. And without extra energy, we cannot create additional value. Now, you could imagine that additional value could be created by immaterial things like knowledge, like development and all of these things, by using AI or these kind of stuff. And you are right, if the amount of highly specialized people would also grow. But the amount of people is growing, but the specialized amount of people is decreasing massively. So we are not adding people with a very high quality, with a very high knowledge, with a very high experience level. Then people we add are the opposite.
Okay. So do you think that there is a possibility to somehow find out a new product or a new market or a new niche that could make up for all the market's loss, for the increase in energy costs, and all the decisions or bad decisions in the past?
I
Is there
love
a
this question.
possibility?
I really love this question because it helps us to get out of a negative spiral. Sadly and gratefully, the answer is yes. There were moments to change this, to get the steering wheel into such kind of a direction. And from my point of view, the possible way to get there is manufacturing knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Knowledge seems like an immaterial product, and it is, but manufacturing knowledge can also be a market. The problem with manufacturing knowledge is this knowledge needs to come out of somewhere. A way to manufacture knowledge is basically a result of highly educated people.
Mm-hmm.
But we kind of missed out to change our education system for the last 40 years.
Okay, but you still have certain advantages in manufacturing for sure. For, as far as I'm concerned, there's a huge knowledge in car manufacturing still. The big problem is that these guys are now 50, 60 years old, and the new generation is I'm not sure that it will be willing to take over and invest all the effort that they need to invest. Because what I was always admiring in Germany was how you came to the factory and you start from, let's start the simplest tasks, and then slowly you grow, and it was a whole career path for you was somehow imagined. And now this career path is completely broken because you go work for one manufacturer, then the other manufacturer needs someone on a higher position and hires someone from a competitor and employs him in a higher position. And then in 2 years, something changed. And this guy goes from one manufacturer from second manufacturer to the fourth manufacturer on the higher level. And that's how he jumps through like 5-10 years of career path that used to take 20 years. Now he's in 3 or 4 years. He's done what people in the 80s have waited 20 years for to achieve. And now you have people that are on high positions that did not walk the walk. Would you agree that that is also a part of a problem?
You're absolutely right with that. And the reason for these things also is kind of difficult to describe. But the point is, first of all, yes, in the past, when you wanted to do a career, you basically had 4 to 6 years in a position where you learned, where you worked, and where you increased your experience level. Not only your salary level, but also your experience level. And it was clear that it had to be like that because that was also the mindset people had. The basic mindset which helped us for generations was, if you want to achieve something, you have to deliver something first. How to keep your job? If your boss pays you for 8 hours, give him 9. That was standard. If you wanted to have a massive salary change, you needed to change what you give first. That was the mindset we had, and that was the mindset I was educated in, and probably you too. With the quick hopping from job to job, first of all, salary levels increased much quicker than earlier, which is not a basic negative thing, but what people delivered for that is not in the same relation anymore. So someone who is changing his positions 5 times in 10 years cannot have the same amount of experience in each level. That's point number 1. Point number 2, the younger people don't want to do that at all. Younger people today are massively flooded with an incredible amount of information, but also expectations on themselves. So if you look at the 21-year-old today, and you ask that person, are you willing to work 50 hours a week for a base salary to create your experience level? The only answer you get is no. Why should I?
Yeah, of course. If you can invest $1,000 somewhere and you get 20,000 by the end of the week.
Yeah. So, and the information flooding with stupid stories, with fake stories, with made up stories is incredibly high too. So if you just look at Instagram or TikTok, whatever, there are thousands of feeds of creators that promise whatever you can do, you can make 5K a week or whatever, you just need to do this and that. And it usually never works. It only works in 0.00 something percentage. It's basically lying, but people are not in the point that they understand that anymore. In the past, when both of us were young, we've basically all heard the story. Listen, if it sounds too good to be true, usually it's not true.
Yep. And another thing that I think that is a huge difference. When we were young, our role models were completely different. And even if we take like car commercials from the 90s and stories who endorsed, I don't know, Mercedes in the 90s and who endorsed Mercedes now. It just now they're influencers, and it's same with Porsche. Now they're influencers and they have a lot of followers, and that is why they get a free car from Porsche. And in the 80s and 90s, almost nobody got a free car from them. They might got a discount, and they were published somehow in their magazine, or that they're successful. For example, I remember one business person, I use Mercedes for 20 years and it's reliable. And only this year I have changed for a new one, and they gave me brand loyalty discount for that. And I took the maximum, I don't know, they gave me free this and this functionality and that, and I plan to use the Mercedes for 20 years. And now these brand deals go, okay, this year or this 6 months I have this car, and the next 6 months I have this car, and it makes no sense. There's no typical buyer, and they don't like stereotypes. I know when I'm offered brand deals, it's just something that I'm completely not applicable to. They would offer to me, and I would have to say thank you for offering this to me. But they would just go, you have this many followers, you are a top voice, okay, you could do a commercial for I don't know what. I got offered a clothes deal, so, and that I would be a model for their clothes. And this is something that for me it's funny how companies have, because, or I would say that is because of the lack of the tradition, because like the public relations in big companies, this was a huge tradition, and there was an old guy being head of everyone that supervised everything. And there were young people that would prepare things, but someone would have to say yes, no, and so on. And now you have young experts with a lot of experiences in a lot of different companies for a really short period of time. And they might have a huge awards from different events for what they're doing. But for example, I'll say this, Porsche is one of my favorite brands for sure. But they published how electric car in China did a lot of vertical meters in one drive, and so on. And then they used like 3 decimal places for to describe what was the elevation change that the car did in 5 days. Yes, that is really good if you are doing, I don't know, something for a suspension where the 4th decimal is needed, because that is 1 millimeter is the 4th decimal. However, when you're describing elevation of the road, meters are completely sufficient.
Absolutely.
So someone in PR department there was no proofreading. something as simple as proofreading was not done. Then, I joked on LinkedIn about it in their post, because they posted on LinkedIn. I said, thank you for the 3 decimal places. And nobody from Porsche would even react to that. They thought that I'm really, thank you for giving me a detailed information. So for me, everything is just a joke. So I know in Germany, you always has, or there was someone that was called Meister there. And before you did anything, this Meister would have to check everything you did, because until you were called Meister, you cannot do anything without someone taking the second look, checking everything. Quality, if you were doing manual labor, they would check your quality. Is your quality sufficient for our company? And then there was someone. And now you have this initial education, and you are expected to be able to control yourself to a degree that there was a person that did the second check of everything.
That is quite true. And also something you said earlier closes the circle a little bit. You know, we've talked in the beginning about financial growth and consuming goods.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, we went to the younger people who didn't like to behave the same way we probably did. You know, on one hand, I do understand the younger people are very good, because when I still have a few memories to the time when I was younger. And there were moments where I thought, holy fucking crap, why does it have to be that way? Why do I have to go to that old hawk to get an okay for something I know better than him when it comes to new technologies, to computing, to programming, and these kind of things? On the other hand, the experience that older person had was based from a completely different point of view, from a different point of experience, from a different point of life experience, from a much further ability to see in the future, which younger people just don't have. It's natural, you know.
Yeah, you don't need it, because everything
On
is
the other hand, our need to consume, to create additional financial growth, basically dictates the behavior we see today with younger people. To change the car every 6 months or every 12 months is the only way to create that revenue, no matter who will then take over the older stuff. To change a career or to change your employer every 2 or 3 years is basically the foundation to be able to afford that new car every month or every year or every whatever. You know, it's a circle we created ourselves by allowing our society to be so much based on financial growth.
Okay, so let's conclude with the one more challenge that I will post. Is it possible to be sustainable, to live in this world, to be well off, and not to need the endless growth? Is that possible?
I believe so. And now, by the way, comes artificial intelligence. Personally, and it's just a side story, you can basically cut it out later on, but personally, I'm not only a nerd, I also love stories and science fiction since I was able to read. There is one guy in the area of science fiction who's called Isaac Asimov. Probably you heard from him. Isaac Asimov was not only a writer with, let's say, with a lot of imagination. Isaac Asimov was also a consultant for the NASA. Isaac Asimov was not only a writer, he was really a scientist. And Asimov was really able to pre-think a lot of things. Many of his writings were the foundation of completely other science fiction stories. Are you still there? Yeah. One of the stories from Isaac Asimov was the so-called foundation cycle. And not like it is now on the TV screen by Apple, but by the real books. He basically described a possible development of humankind. And funnily, he also used artificial intelligence in that thought experiment a lot. Now, if we would just beam 100 years in the future, or 50 years in the future, or probably even 35 years, our world could look very different. If we assume a combination of artificial intelligence and quantum computing, we eliminate one of the main downsides of computing in the past. One of the main downsides was the two-state system, 0 and 1. With a two-state system, it's incredibly difficult to create something that we could name higher thoughts, because a two-state system is just not real, not even in physics, although we thought long it is. The deeper we go into quantum computing and quantum physics, we realize that everything has probably much more than only two states. If we assume an artificial intelligence running on a quantum computing, we could easily extrapolate a society or a way of living where the classic human labor is just not needed anymore. It's still needed to clean the sewers. It's still needed to do heavy work. But with that kind of artificial intelligence, we could deploy mechanical drones doing that work. That would lead to a system where no one of us would have to do any real labor work if we don't want to do that. Why do I say if we don't want to do that? Now, if you like to sculpture something, it's something you want to do. If you like to write something, it's something you want to do. If you want to create art, music, stories, whatever, it's something you want to do. If you want to nurture people, it's something you want to do. If you want to explore new boundaries, wherever, in medicine, in scientifics, in whatever, it's something you want to do. Now, if we are able as humankind to develop artificial intelligence within some safeguarded boundaries and find a way to stop killing each other, but to create an environment where labor work is being done by us, we could find a system where there is no real lack of basic needs, because the earth has everything we need. And we know that it's not a problem that we lack of resources.
Yeah, it's
we lack of ability to supply. Yeah. If we could manage to get to a point where labor work is being done, we would reach a situation that no one of us really has to do a job, but is free to do what he is longing for. Giving a proper education, there won't be many people who will be lazy. Because why are people lazy? Because there is nothing they could do that they really want to do. As soon, and it's usually in every society, as soon as you educate someone in the way he wants to and his talents are directed to, this person will always find motivation to create. If we find a way as humankind to develop in that direction, we could easily forget all the problems we have right now. The only ones who might have a problem with that situations are those who are still living on greedy grounds, which means those who cannot imagine such kind of a society or such kind of a system. And even those, if they understand that they will never lack of something, because in that kind of society, you won't lack of something. Lack is a system of not having something fulfilled. But if there is no lack of something, you can finally create what you in yourself would like to do. So that is a possible idea. I know it's a bit idealistic. I understand that we will be there tomorrow.
We'll see how this develops, because there are a lot of ifs and whens and afters and befores.
Oh, yes.
So thank you very much for this great debate. and I hope that we continue in the near future when we see how things are developing in Germany in the next month or two.
I hope it will be a positive development. Peter, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure to be with you, as always.